Welcome back to From the Burbs to the Tetons. This is going to be a series about the projects I did the fall 2019 in Idaho. The first and most important project was getting my mailing address activated so I could get things delivered. I am definitely addicted to mail order, and Amazon in particular. I don't mind shopping locally. What I do mind is going to a store looking for something and them being out of stock. It's really frustrating and a total waste of time. A secondary reason on this trip why I used a lot of mail order for stuff was that I only had a car. I did not have my pickup truck out west to carry things from Home Depot and that kind of stuff. So for instance, I ordered a dual fuel generator that weighed about 200 pounds from Amazon so it would be delivered because I didn't have any way to go pick it up. Same thing with the wheelbarrow cement mixer. And then another thing was I really needed to order a lot of stuff for the RV to make it livable. The sooner I made it livable, the sooner I could stop paying hotel room rates to be out there. So here I'm creating the post for the mailbox. I'm doing a lap joint on 2 pieces of wood. It was an original 8-foot 4x4. I had it cut at the lumber yard because I was worried about fitting the 8-foot 4x4 in the back of my car. By having them cut the first cut that I needed, it made it real easy for me to fit the 2 shorter pieces in the trunk. I'm still getting used to the notches on the circular saw, so I had to cut the lap joint several times for the first one. On the second piece of wood, I got it pretty close on the very first one. Getting the lap joint smooth in the middle was kind of a pain because I didn't have any chisels to get it smooth, so I did the best I could. And then something very, very exciting happened during me doing this, which was the UPS truck showed up with my first order from Amazon. I was just really, really excited. I was having nightmares about not being able to have things delivered to the property because when I put in my first orders into Amazon, it wouldn't recognize my address. After finishing the lap joint, I went ahead and cut enough off the member holding up the mailbox, the back end, to do a brace. I put the brace on the back of the member instead of in the front, which is where you probably usually see it, but I did that to balance out the weight of the member. It being balanced is important because it's going to be sitting in a bucket instead of in the ground. And the reason I'm doing this, and it's very common in the valley, is because when you get 6, 8, 9, 10 inches of snow and the snowplow comes by and throws all that snow up against the side of your mailbox, it usually rips it off the post or knocks it down or just damages it beyond repair. By having it in the bucket, it gives you the option of moving the bucket with the mailbox out of the way. It also made it real easy for me to store it for the winter. I bought a Class C motorhome to use for temporary housing while I was there on the property doing work. I'll do the math for you. That's 35 years. I knew I was going to have some growing pains with it as far as figuring out how to make it work for me. But the weather was really crappy while I was there. I was expecting anywhere between 60 degrees during the day as kind of a high, maybe mid 55s, and high 30s, probably around 40 at night. But what it was really like was that 5 days out of the week, it was lucky to get up to 40 during the day and was often in the mid-20s at night. I remember my neighbor feeling a little guilty that it was taking me a bit of time to get into it, living-wise, and I told him, I said, look, I was expecting growing pains. If I wasn't, I would have bought a 5-year-old motorhome, not a 35-year-old motorhome. So a couple of things that I had to deal with right off the bat that I wasn't ready for. The propane tank that was built into it was pretty small, and I hadn't really thought about the fact I needed a propane tank. I did the rental swap one, 20 pounds, which barely worked overnight at first, and I'll get into that later. The other thing was, too, is it didn't have a battery, so I had to buy a battery. So those were kind of like the two big things that kind of slowed me down for a bit. So what happened is I had a hotel reservation for 2 days, and then was hoping to get into the RV, realized that that wasn't going to happen, and ended up getting a room for another 3 nights. So I ended up 5 nights, almost a week, staying in hotel rooms when I first got there. Now, I realized overnight that I was using almost 20 pounds of propane, and the guy who sold it to me recommended that, those are single pane windows. You probably should cover the windows with something. And I did, and what I ended up getting was this, it looks like bubble wrap, except it's got a silver coating on each side, and it's for insulation. I took those, I put them over the windows, and that worked great. There's the fans at the top of the roof. There's 2 of them in this. And the front one was completely broken and just kind of laying there. And lots of air was coming through there. So I ended up getting some insulation and putting it up there along with a plastic bag that did a good job there. The vent over the stove was just horrendous. I didn't realize it until one day, all of a sudden I started getting this cold breeze across my back. I tracked it down and I ended up using foam in there and just filled it up. I never plan on using the stove for cooking in there. Speaking of eating, one of the important parts was for the microwave to work. Just about everything I have for breakfast and lunch is microwavable. Every once in a while I had a dinner there too, which I would microwave. I was fine with that short term. One of the sacrifices I was willing to make to save money, and it also, I bought all diet meals, so it helped me lose some weight. Another decision I had to make with the camper was, what was I going to do about water, running water, flushing, that kind of stuff. I decided with it so cold, I didn't want to take a chance of the water tanks freezing and busting and all that kind of stuff. It was one thing I just didn't need to deal with. So I ended up going with a 5-gallon water jug with a pump on top. That worked great for drinking water. I also purchased 2 camping water jugs for just utility kind of water, washing my hands, flushing the toilet. There was no water to flush the toilet, so I just had a cup I would fill up and pour it down the toilet for flushing. And for number 2, I used public restrooms as often as possible, but I also had a hunter's chair with a bag, plastic bag, doggy bag basically. And that worked out great when I needed to use it locally. I was going to rent a porta potty, and it's required by code, but the guy in the valley who rents them had stopped renting them for the winter. So if you didn't have one already, he wasn't going to rent you one. And then for hygiene, personal hygiene, taking showers, I joined the local gym. It's open 24 hours. And then in town, there's this great laundromat. It's the nicest laundromat I've ever been to, and every single machine worked. And I loved the dryers because all you did is you put in quarters for 5 minutes. So if you needed 35 minutes, you could do 35 minutes. You needed 40 minutes, you could do 40 minutes. I don't know how many places I've been where it's like, oh, you got to put $1.25 in and you get 40 minutes. And if the dryer isn't working well and you needed 45 minutes, guess what? You put in another $1.25 for 5 more minutes. So this was great too. And because they really worked properly, for light stuff, it was like 35 minutes. For sweatshirts and things like that, was about 40 minutes. And then, of course, I needed all the regular stuff you need when you're moving into like a new apartment. I needed bedding, I needed basic spices and forks and napkins and paper towels and toilet paper and, all that kind of stuff. I think I spent about $150, maybe closer to $200. Yeah, it was closer to $200 for my first trip to Walmart. But after just a couple of days, I felt like I was in a pretty good rhythm, except for the cold. About a week into being there, we were going to have a night where it was going to be like 17 degrees. I was thinking, well, maybe I should do a hotel room or something like that. And that's when I was discussing things with my neighbor after I had helped him a little bit with his barn. I'll show you a picture of that. And he had mentioned at that point that, hey, you need to cover those windows with something. That kind of covers the basics of getting moved into the RV. Now, I didn't stop there. I kind of wanted to make the place my own, and I'll cover more of that on the second video, along with getting into some things like the shed I built and, you know, other projects around the homestead. If you got any questions, please put them down below. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. Love for you to subscribe and come along for the journey, and I'll see you on the next video.